Cohasset Planning Board. This is Wednesday, September 23rd. The time is 6:30 p.m. and we're conducting a Zoom virtual meeting. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Lauren Lynn, who is the Planning Director for town. And in addition, I am working with Clark. Let's see, I don't know if Clark's here or not. I don't see Clark. I am working with Tom Callahan, Paul Colery, Paul Grady, and Erik Potter. So we have a quorum. So we have 3 items on the agenda tonight. 2 items which Lauren will introduce, and an informal conversation with Mr. Timothy Davis, who is the chair of the Harbor Committee. So Lauren, I'd like to pass it to you.
Madam Chair, so the first item on the agenda is a public hearing, a continued public hearing for the Harbor Village Business Overlay District special permit and site plan approval for properties at 124 and 87 Elm Street. I will note that the applicant has requested a continuance. They would like some more time to get certain things together before the next hearing date. They've supplied me with a very brief statement that they've asked for me to read into the record, and then they have requested that this hearing be continued to the October 7th meeting. So I will read that aloud. This is a statement provided by Mr. Ted Lubitz. The statement is, CHI Elm Street Realty LLC is requesting a continuance until October 7th. As our team has been working since our last meeting to review and analyze the comments received from the planning board members, peer reviewer Weston and Sampson, and the public. Accordingly, we are in the process of making revisions to the plan that will respond to many of those comments while maintaining the overall feasibility and viability of a redevelopment. Our goal is to provide all updates and responses in advance of the meeting on October 7th with adequate time for peer reviewer and planning board members to review. Additionally, we have been working with the Affordable Housing Steering Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to propose a viable and specific affordable housing strategy to accomplish the stated goals in the housing production plan and the subject matter subcommittee experts. We plan on submitting a joint proposal and recommendation to the planning board on October 7th with respect to affordable housing. Thank you. So with that, I would then turn to the planning board to suggest that this hearing be continued to October 7th at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Please say your name.
Paul Grady, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Erik Potter, aye.
Paul Colery, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you. We have about 7 minutes before we hit the 6:40 p.m. time when we are expected to take up an informal discussion with Mr. Davis.
I'm happy to start early, Amy, if you'd like.
Well, once we post a time, as you know, we feel compelled to maintain it so that anyone in the public or somebody else that might be interested would be able to tune in and hear the discussions. What we can do, I think, let me ask Lauren, could we go to, you have to make 2 decisions. One, if we can do it, and then if it's enough time, could you provide staff updates? Is there anything that we need to talk about this evening? And can we do this?
Yes, so I'll answer your question. Things can be taken out of order for regular business administration, sort of informal discussions. The things that cannot be taken out of order are public hearings. Those cannot start earlier than the advertised time. So if you would like Tim to begin early, that's not a problem. If you'd like him to wait until 6:40, that's not a problem. I can give you some quick staff updates if you prefer, so I'll turn it back to you and see what you'd like to do. Tom has a question.
Can I just interrupt? Can I interrupt? I see Clark is an attendee, but not a panelist.
I kept checking to see if he would. I will promote him now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great. And Clark Brewer has just joined us. So we now have everyone on the planning board here. I think for the sake of Mr. Davis's time, we can begin our informal discussion. And let me preface this discussion by originating it. I was the one who wanted to have Tim come speak with us because there was a piece that he wrote on Cohasset 143 that I thought was had a lot of information in it that was pertaining to the harbor and potentially the harbor development, and that we would all be much better off if we actually heard from Tim about some of the items that he had written about. So that's why we're having this discussion.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. With the completion of the Cohasset Master Plan and the Cohasset Municipal Harbor Plan, the town of Cohasset is embarking on a 10-year odyssey to implement the many suggestions and recommendations of these plans. The harbor plan alone has 52 separate projects and many more sub-projects. Over the course of the next 10 years, the harbor will likely see investments from public, private, and nonprofit sources of between $50 and $100 million. We're incredibly fortunate to have many citizen volunteers with vast experience and skill sets that will be needed to successfully accomplish these implementations. We also have many very talented town employees who will assist in that effort. Many of the issues discussed in both the master and harbor plan are interrelated, which will require much coordination and cooperation to be successful. The first working group of the MPIC, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, has already commenced and is reviewing the Elm Street corridor connecting Cohasset Village and Cohasset Harbor. Without reviewing the entire plan, let me touch on some of the priorities for implementation. First and foremost, the preservation and sustainability of the Cohasset commercial fishing fleet has been at the top of our list since day one. The town has already applied for and received a grant from the Seaport Economic Council to start the process of upgrading the Government Island pier and dock, including a lift system. Private interests are at work studying an opportunity to expand the species harvested from the sea. There will soon be a working group tasked with working with the harbor master to develop a long-term plan for dredging the channel, the cove, Bailey Creek, and Cohasset Harbor, so that commercial fishing vessels may have a predictable all-tide access to the harbor. Another priority outlined in the harbor plan is access, both visual and physical access. Currently, unless you happen to be a member of the yacht club, the sailing club, CMI, or a commercial fisherman, it's very difficult to actually get on the water in the harbor. For several years, the Harbor Committee and this board, the Planning Board, have worked with two potential builders to provide a view corridor from Elm Street to the harbor. The town approved an overlay district which would enable a builder to remove the current blight that is the Cohasset Harbor Inn, and with your approval, construct a building that would vastly improve the neighborhood, create a view corridor, create public access by way of an improved Captain's Walk, and provide millions of dollars of tax revenue to the town. I urge you to approve this project as soon as possible. Environmental and ecological issues are also paramount if we are to preserve Cohasset Harbor into the future. Several boards and committees are working to address, with Situate, the pollution of the Gulf River, and Cohasset Harbor. Finally, a nonprofit, soon to be a 501c3, is looking at ways to acquire private properties around Cohasset Harbor for the benefit of Cohasset community. Friends of Bassings Beach has already acquired property on Bassings Beach in its effort to conserve and preserve outer Cohasset Harbor for the perpetual enjoyment of the public. I've proposed several structures for the implementation of the harbor plan, including the formation of a harbor plan implementation committee, patterned after the master plan implementation committee. Having received some pushback on creating a new committee, I proposed a smaller working group reporting to the Harbor Committee and Select Board with liaisons to planning, finance, and engineering. I've been invited to seek guidance from the Select Board and certainly welcome your advice and counsel as well. Let me close by saying those of us who work on the many committees, subcommittees, and working groups in the town fully recognize that we are advisory, principally to the Select Board and to town meeting. I am well aware that we will be faced with trade-offs and compromises as we move forward, and will certainly not get everything we might want. What we ask of those of you who serve in elected capacities and have the approval and decision-making authority is that you come to that process with the greater Cohasset community in mind, present your opinions as forcefully as you will, but when it comes time to vote, please vote with the greater good in mind. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. I will go by alphabetical order and allow the planning board members to speak. Clark Brewer.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Clark.
Thanks for the article in the paper. That was really great too. What's the time frame on some of the other projects like the ramp and the fisherman provisions, the hoistway and dredging, do you think?
Okay, those are three separate projects.
Yep.
I assume by ramp you mean the Parker Avenue boat ramp.
Yes.
That is a project that's been underway now for, gosh, probably 3 years.
Sure.
We have a grant from the Seaport to finish the engineering, and I think it is going to end up being a project that requires a cofferdam, which is an expensive project. The Harbor Committee asked the engineer to look at doing it, as we call it, wet, which means doing the development without a cofferdam. But it looks like nobody's willing to do that. So it will be done probably with a cofferdam. The engineering will be completed this year, and hopefully then we have to find the funding, which will be probably $500,000 to $750,000 to actually do the project. The Government Island Pier and dock system is one that's just starting. Really, we've done some drawing and some engineering. We want to engage the commercial fishermen in that. The lift system has been discussed now for years. At low tide, I don't know if any of you have been down there on the docks to see the commercial fishermen lift hundreds of pounds of both bait and lobsters and up from 10-foot tide. It's a struggle. And so we have been talking about putting a lift system in there. There's a proposal to add docks and improve the dock system. That's probably, I would say, a 2 to 3 year project. Dredging is a project that is forever project. We need to have a system that says every so many years, the channel needs to be dredged every 2 or 3 years. The cove area hasn't been dredged. I think, Lori will probably fault me in saying this, but I don't think it's been dredged in 5 or 6 years, and Bailey Creek probably 10 years. The main part of the harbor was dredged, but only partially dredged. So we need a whole plan to look at systematically contracting to dredge the harbor and to provide the funding for it. The way it works right now is the commercial fishermen start going out 1 year at low tide and run aground in the channel. They call the harbor master. The harbor master says, okay, we need to dredge, and gets a hold of the Army Corps of Engineers. And 2 years later, we have a dredging program, which some of you may have lived through. The last time we did it, it was really a fiasco. So that is something that we should be able to do that, Clark, in less than a year, to put a program together that is implemented basically every year. Tom, you're muted. Are you talking?
Tom Callahan?
Well, dredging is under federal jurisdiction, and it's costly. It requires federal approval. And I'm wondering where the hell the money's going to come to dredge every year. I mean, we went 30 years between the last two dredges.
No, it wasn't that long.
We were pretty damn close.
No,
But
it wasn't.
it
It wasn't.
I just don't know, I just don't know how you undertake a municipal program for that because
Well,
of the federal jurisdiction.
That's one of the things we have to determine, Tom. And when we have the answer, I am sure that we will present it to you. But it has to be done. Otherwise, if we don't do it, the commercial fishing fleet is in jeopardy.
I understand that. I understand that, but you just can't go out and dredge federal waters. And when the federal government does it, they mostly pay for it.
Well,
And
that's
I just
one way to
don't
do
know
it.
where the money would come from if the town was to take that on themselves.
No, the town will not pay for it.
So this is not a resolvable issue? This is really.
No, but it's an
information meeting?
easily answered issue. It's not, it shouldn't be foreign to people of what the jurisdiction of federal waters is.
And that's a useful piece of information for all of us to have. Let me ask,
Well, the question was, sort of aspirational in terms of the goals and time frame. That was really what I was centered on, not necessarily the details or practicality. So that was a fine answer, Tim. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Paul Cleary?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. And I, too, enjoyed the post on 143. I guess my only question was, you had mentioned a 501c3 that was about to file their paperwork, and then you mentioned the Friends of Baskin Beach. Is that the same? Is that the same entity, or is that two separate entities?
Well, the 501c3, Friends of Basking Beach is a nonprofit, Massachusetts nonprofit that has filed for a 501c status with the federal government. And they expect to have that by the end of this year.
Okay,
So
no, I was just curious, was that the same entity that was looking to buy up some of the properties, that were around the harbor to protect them for the town? That's the same entity, yeah?
Well, it could be. It really depends, but it could be. It's one entity that could do that. You may be aware of the Cohasset Conservation Trust that has done a similar thing. The Cohasset Land Foundation is another one that's done a similar thing. So there are a number of nonprofit and 501c3s that have done this. So which one actually does it remains to be seen. But there are a number of people that are looking to do that and do it for the benefit of the Cohasset community.
Excellent. Thank you. That's the only point of clarification I was looking for. Otherwise, thanks again for being here with us.
You bet. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Paul Grady?
Hi, good evening. I thought your article was quite enlightening. So I just have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. You alluded in that article to future plans for, if I'm not mistaken, Atlantica, the Lobster Pound, and the small restaurant next to it. I'm sorry, the name's escaped. Saltos. Thanks so much. But you alluded to plans or future plans for those three structures. Could you enlighten us at all on those?
Well, I can tell you some things. There's not much really that is definitive at this point, but let me start with the Mill River Marina, which is where the Lobster Pound is. That property was acquired by Tom Sullivan, who lives in Cohasset in the summer and in Florida in the winter. It houses the Lobster Pound and used to house the boatyard that Frank Carey ran for many years. It has been essentially dark for 10 years, other than the Lobster Pound and occasionally the boatyard. Tom Sullivan loves Cohasset, would love to do something there that benefits the town and the harbor and the community. He realizes there are restrictions. Chapter 91 restricts that property to water dependent use. But he and I have been talking about a number of different initiatives that would benefit the town and the harbor. Nothing is definitive at this point other than conversations going on. I can tell you as an aside, I've also been involved in trying to protect outer Cohasset Harbor from a commercial aquaculture farm that a few people in Situate are trying to put in there. And if we're successful
You're talking about the oyster farm, right?
Pardon me?
You're talking about the oyster harvesting.
Yes, and if we're successful in doing that, then many of us who've been involved in that will turn our attention to aquaculture that would be appropriate for Cohasset and appropriate for the community at large. And one of them would be working with the Mill River Marina where the lobster pound already is. So that's kind of a general overview of what's going on there. The Atlantica and Salt House are tied in to a large extent with what goes on with the Cohasset Harbor Inn. They're owned by the same group of people. They're financially intertwined. If things fall correctly and you all as a planning board are comfortable with the plans to move forward with the Cohasset Harbor Inn property, then there could very well be some very interesting things that happen with the Salt House Atlantica properties that would be, again, in the benefit of the community. And I really can't say much more about that because they really haven't developed far at this point. The other properties along the around the harbor, you have the Oaks, which is currently owned by Jerry Butler. I've been in touch with Jerry Butler. He is very interested in preserving what the Oaks is and helping Cohasset and Cohasset Harbor. And on the other side is Bassing Beach, which is in Situate, but the Cohasset Conservation Trust is also very interested in preserving Cohasset Harbor for the benefit of the public. I'm happy to try to be more specific, but at this point, that's about what I have.
I guess we'll see more down the road.
Yes, you will. You certainly will.
Great. Thank you very much. Erik Potter?
Hi, guys. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi, Eric.
Thanks a lot, Tim, for the presentation. Not too many questions, really, just a kind of more of a general comment that I have. And actually, one question, one general comment. I think the concern that I have is a little bit is that a lot of our harbor, which is one of our greatest resources here in town, is bordered by private property. So there's a delicate balance that takes place there. And I really don't know the answers to it, but I think it's complicated on how you preserve that harbor so that it's not just a privatized harbor with expensive condominiums lining it and still has access for the public. I think that's important for the community, and the fishermen are very important, and trying to maintain that balance between the rights of the people that own those properties and the public is paramount, I think. Are there any other, has there been time or attention spent to potentially, looking at public access points that can maybe be, I'm not saying developed in a commercial sense, but maybe developed a little bit more so that, even if worst case scenario did happen, the public would still be able to have a vital use, of that harbor with the, we're going to have the harbor walk that maybe connects down to the Parker Ave, or basically the different, different scenarios that could take place that would allow for, the public at large to still access the harbor, even if all the access points that we can readily identify, the Harbor Inn, the Atlantica, the Lobster Pound are going at more of a privatized residential direction. I think that'd be something to maybe have in our back pocket. And I think it could also keep it more vital, keep it a place where all of us can use it down the road.
Very good point, Eric. And let me tell you that public access to the harbor has been a priority for the Harbor Committee and for me personally. I am blessed with the fact that I live right on the ocean and I see it every day. And I am concerned virtually every day about the number of people who live in Cohasset that don't have access to this beautiful harbor that we have. So there are a number of things that public access that we can do to improve it. Starting from the Oaks, there is a pier that's not far from there that can be improved with public access. Across the street from that, on Margin Street, there is a piece of property that is zoned for private residents, but is owned by the Cohasset Harbor Inn. If we negotiate well and make things, make everybody happy, that property could be more of a public access to the harbor. And that's one I can assure you I've been working on. Jackie Dormister, who is largely responsible for the Captain's Walk as it exists today, is very excited about improving the Captain's Walk so that you could essentially walk from the Oaks around the harbor, on the harbor, all the way to Government Island with a wide enough space so that you could walk, you could put strollers, you could roller skate, you can do various things with it. The owners of the properties, they are private properties, but I've talked to each and every one of them, and they are very interested in working with the Harbor Committee, with the Planning Board, with the Select Board, with the town of Cohasset to make Cohasset a vibrant, exciting place for all the public, not just the people that are members of the various clubs around there. So this is a high priority. I can also say that Government Island, in my opinion, is an underused resource for the town. There's a lot that could be done there to make it more accessible for the public and really a very exciting place for not only for the Cohasset community, but visitors who might come to visit Cohasset. So that is, your concerns are our concerns, Eric, and we are definitely going to address them.
Thanks, Tim.
Tom Callahan?
Well, speaking of public access to the harbor, there was a proposal, I think it was made by Peter Roy at one point, to put a small boat marina, like, not a lot of boats, no more than like 20 or 30, in the area between the Mill River Marine and the restaurant. Has that ever been discussed again?
I'm afraid I lost you, Tom.
I'm sorry, has anybody ever discussed again the idea of a small boat marina along the area between the restaurant and Mill River?
Between the restaurant and Mill River Marina?
Yeah.
I believe that's all private property in different hands. I don't think that's owned by
Well, nobody owns
either
the
Mill River
water.
Marina or the Atlantica. Is that what that area, the area you're
Well,
talking?
it was an idea that came up probably 10, 12 years ago that Peter Roy came up with. And sketches were done, drawings were done.
Tom, we approved a dock, and I think this is going back 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know which of this, like 3 properties that are to the east of Border Street there, and one of them, they designed a dock, never built it. I actually don't know who owns it right now. I think
Yeah, I recall it was a longer time ago than that, and it was Roy who proposed it because he owned everything on the harbor at that point. So
that wasn't. It wasn't Peter who
it was
was
somebody. Yeah, I know. But something was drawn up.
It was 3 or 4 years ago, but it was a single dock for a single user.
No, this was something long before that would have allowed, I mean, we're talking small boats, like 15 feet, little runabouts, so that
I mean,
So
that's
that the average Joe could use the harbor instead of all the people with big boats.
that's a different animal, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
and
the latest. That's
So-
not the latest that's been approved.
I know it's a different animal, but it was an idea that came up many years ago, and I wonder if it's been thought about as a way of increasing access to the harbor.
Okay, so just a minute, I'd like to let Paul Grady comment here.
The question on what you two were just talking about. Now, would any of these approvals still be in place, or would they have to reapply?
I don't think anything was ever approved. I don't think it ever got
Clark was saying,
beyond.
Tom, that's something Clark was saying a dock had been approved.
Yeah, we approved a dock,
But would it have to be
gangway and
reapplied?
floats. But in
Was
terms
that
of
grandfather, Clark?
whether that
That's what I-
approval lapsed, it was a ZBA permit and we made a recommendation. But whether that permit's lapsed because it was never executed, I couldn't say.
Okay.
So
Well-
one thing we can do is ask Lauren when she has time to look into this and look into the history so that at least we have some idea of where it stands now. I'm going to call on Erik Potter and then Tom Callahan, and then we're going to close that and go to the next item.
So Tim, or it may not be for Tim, it may be for Lauren, the question. You know, I think there's a lot of moving parts with regards to how these things all play out. And I'm someone that's increasingly frustrated by the, you know, I understand the reasons for the, you know, they have to have the open meeting laws and all these other things, but, and the bureaucracy of it all and how it all works is something that maybe I miss a little bit here. So, you know, with regards to even projects that are in the pipeline or coming up, who is the party that really starts to negotiate these things with these? Is it the harbor committee that negotiates directly with the private landowners to try to get things moving forward here? Because the concern that I would see is that, you know, if timelines don't match up, an opportunity can be missed. And is that something that, Tim, you would kind of quarterback, or was that something where someone at town would quarterback with these private land? How does that all work?
Well, it's a very good point, Eric, and I share your frustration. Having chaired the Harbor Committee now for 3 years, I've been trying to implement projects for at least 2, and it's not easy. I can tell you that any development, if you'll just, anything that is actually built on the harbor has to go through the town process, which means it has to be permitted by the planning board, it has to go to the select board. The Harbor Committee is advisory only. Now, what the Harbor Committee does is work with some of these folks, both public and private, to generate an idea that we all think would be good for the harbor community, both public and private. But any of those would come to you as in the planning board. We don't approve anything. Even dredging, Tom, we're not going to approve dredging. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approves dredging, but the Army Corps isn't going to do anything with dredging unless we ask them to. So, you know, there are, as I say, there are 52 projects in the harbor that are in the harbor plan, if you care to read them. And this is going to take a lot of work, a lot of working groups, a lot of people willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work and do the research, find the funding, and get the job done.
And just quickly, I won't take any more time, but I'm just talking like, you know, very much like who's going to be brokering the deal, in other words, right? So that when it comes in front of the planning board or the selectmen, there's somebody that says, hey, you know, whether it's you, Tim, right? You say, Tim, you know, planning board, by the way, we've had these conversations with XYZ developer or XYZ landowner, and be prepared that this is something that, you know, should be coming down the pipeline, or is that a Chris Senior, or, you know, you know, that's where, you know, because it can easily, there's so many moving parts here, and without everyone being really on the same page, you could think you're close to maybe working out something for the harbor committee, and then, you know, a permit's given or something like that, or you know, something happens and you know, that boat is, you know, leaves harbor, in other words, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, the brokering of the deal, I think, that's an important person, and it's also important for the developers and the private landowners to know who that person is that they would be initiating those conversations with, I would think.
Yes.
So I'd just like to comment that this is why Tim is here, is because I knew from the article that he wrote that he's working on things, and I knew that they were going to intersect us. but we hadn't had any conversations. And I'm going to hold the same kind of conversation with the zoning board and the conservation commission, because there are things that are happening that come to us at very irregular times. They don't go 1, 2, 3. They go 1, 2, 3. I mean, they're all over the place. And so this is trying to keep us informed so we can be more effective as a board.
And I'm happy, Amy, I'm happy to come anytime to give you a 10-minute update on where we are, what the state of the harbor is. Happy to do it. There is nothing that's being done in secret. Everything is open meeting as far as the harbor committee is concerned, and the implementation of it will all be run. Lauren is going to look after me and make sure that I do everything, cross the I's and dot the T's. When it comes to the private ownership, as Erik has pointed out, a lot of the properties are in private ownership. That when they finally get to the point where they make sense from the owner's standpoint, if I'm involved, they will certainly make sense from the harbor and the community standpoint, then they will come to you.
All right. So Paul Grady, you have you please speak, and then Tom Callahan will have the last word.
Fair enough. I hope that,
I guess second to the last word. Clark will have the last word.
thank goodness. I do hope, with this Cohasset, with the harbor inn and all that, so meetings we've had and all this. Now, again, just reading your letter, it seems that there's a big rush to judgment to get this harbor, something done with it within the next 10 years, a harbor that needs some improvement. But, I'm going to be honest, it just seems pretty fast.
What, 10 years?
10-year plan is not a bad plan, but as I said, plans for Atlantica, plans for the Pound, plans for this thing. It's just it should be a step-by-step process. I hope that's what you guys are planning. With what happens with the hospital, with the inn, for good or bad, or for however it comes out.
Well, you're absolutely right, Paul. I've lived in Cohasset now about 15 years. I've been coming to Cohasset for 45 years. My family's been in Cohasset for about 100 years. The biggest blight of the harbor is the Cohasset Harbor Inn, and how the planning board of those days allowed that to happen is beyond me.
But that's behind us, Tim. We're going forward. This is what I'm saying.
The sooner that can, and it's been in the works for change for at least 3 or 4 years. And so, I don't think it's a rush to judgment. I mean, you in your wisdom, you and your colleagues in your wisdom have to decide whether this is the best thing for the community. But I can assure you that what's there now is not.
That's no one's going to disagree with you on that one, Tim. It's just that we're working on that right now. We've got a lot of meetings on it, taking time out of everyone's schedule, yours included. So thank you for coming. It's just, again, in reading your letter, I think you understand that, look, yeah, it was a very nice letter, well thought out. But it's to a degree, it's looking at the harbor as something, as Erik had put it, that no one wants to see at some point in time, the high-end condo chain encircling that harbor.
I don't think that will happen. I really don't think that'll happen, Paul. And I think what's proposed is not going to be that. I can assure you that there are many of us who do not want to see Cohasset Harbor turned into the coast of Scituate, for instance. We don't want to see little ticky-tacky houses around Cohasset. There are some big properties that we as a town are going to have to wrestle with. The Bellamines, for instance. The Bellamines has got a big property up there, and the last thing we want to see, in my opinion, I'm not wearing any of the hats of the committees that I chair or are members of, but as a citizen of Cohasset, I do not want to see a bunch of condominiums sitting up on the Bellamines. I mean, it would be devastating to the, for everything that we hold dear in Cohasset. So you have a partner in me to work toward that end, Paul, I can assure you. But there are things that we need to do, and it's not rushing to judgment. We've been working on some of these things for years, and the time has come to say, is this the best thing for Cohasset, and move forward.
I agree with you, but it's nice to bring the boat in, bring my family in, come in, and same as you, I'm sure, and the people in this group who boat, and, you know, we have a beautiful little spot.
Well, Paul, I think it's
Okay,
also
so
good.
in the interest of time and the fact that we're now over time, I'm going to let Tom speak and then Clark, and then we'll close this up. As Tim said, he's willing to come talk to us again. And
Thank you,
I
Tim.
think that, given that he is related to the CHI activity, it would behoove us to have him come every now and then to just share ideas. Thank you. Tom, and then Clark.
I didn't want to talk about the harbor project tonight, but I know Ted's an attendee listening to us. But I am really concerned, and I brought this up, at least in my written comments, I think in a verbal comment in the harbor.
Tom, I think we agreed on the agenda and it's posted as such, that there won't be deliberation.
I'm not trying to deliberate, but everything is so intertwined here, and my concern is this, that I just heard a statement that it would be horrible if there's condos in one part of the harbor, yet they're closed for another part of the harbor. And what I am concerned about is that this cryptic message about something's going to happen at Atlantica and the Salt House, depending on this project. And despite what the bylaw that the Harbor Committee and the developer wrote, we're looking for deviations from it, saying that a lot of businesses are not viable in the harbor. I'm going to presume that that means like 2 restaurants at both the Atlantica site and the hotel site would not be viable. And I'm just a little concerned that we're not thinking of this comprehensively with the whole harbor. We're being put into, and I appreciate that the developer may not know what it wants to do with Atlantica yet, but I'm sure there's been some ideas discussed, and we're going to be asked to make a decision that I don't think, I don't dislike the project that's being proposed, but we're going to be asked to make a decision in a vacuum of not knowing what dominoes are going to go down in other parts of the harbor because of it. And I think that's a problem.
Well, Tom.
And I think that the representation that a lot of the harbor is dark parts of the year, I've received quite a bit of lobbying on this harbor project that, it's like, make this decision, make it quick, just do it. This is a project that's going to affect the harbor for the next 4 years, like the hotel has been the eyesore that it is for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be rushed. And I also don't want to decide it in a vacuum without knowing what dominoes will fall after that. And
Well,
that's,
no
I'm sure
dominoes are going to
frustrated by
fall.
that.
No dominoes are going to fall
Then
without.
Tim,
So
with all due respect,
don't
don't
really
give me
want to go
some
back and
cryptic
forth
answer.
like this.
Well,
Let me make a recommendation, which is we can ask Lauren to ask the developer to allow us to ask this question in our next hearing. If we feel that this is a critical item for our ability to make a good decision, a complete decision for members of the community, then it is certainly a question we can ask, I would suspect, and we can see what the answer is. All right, because I don't think, we can't debate it out here. Lauren?
Thank you.
At the same time, I don't like cryptic things. I know something else is coming down the pipe.
Thank you. So just a couple of things that I'd like to address in reaction to a couple of comments that were made. One, anything that was to be redeveloped that's waterfront and falls within Chapter 91 jurisdiction, as well heard, goes to the state permitting requirements, and there are public access requirements there that are all different around those sites. So that would apply to, I would say, most of the sites that we're thinking of directly abutting the harbor. Second is, I want to remind folks that the zoning overlay that is applicable to the site that we're talking about for 124 and 87 Elm, there's specific sites that are applicable there. It's not the entire harbor. There's not zoning in place that would support the type of development that's being proposed for that site all around the harbor. The next thing is that, though I completely understand where everyone is coming from and that we want to look at this from the whole view comprehensively, I just have to say that the nature of permitting, and it's unfortunately that you can't make reactions and judgments pontificating on what might happen on abutting sites. We can't project what may happen in the future. We have to analyze what's in front of us right now and what one project will have an impact. We can't string them along to all the projects. So that's just a couple of comments that I want. Oh, and then there was one more comment. Erik Potter made a comment asking who would be sort of facilitating, brokering deals. My reaction to that is that my role as planning director for the town, if someone were to come to me and ask, where do I begin in a permitting process? I'm interested in doing X. We as town staff can assist them in, X, Y, and Z. You would need to go to this board, this is the zoning that's applicable here. But that's not something that I would ever go out and sort of seek out of private interests. So just the clarification there is that if there was, someone with a tentative project in mind that came to town asking how they would go about doing that, we would assist them in that way, but I would not go and solicit that from someone. So just, those are my points in reaction to all of these comments that have been made.
Very good.
All right. Thank you for that. Clark Brewer.
Lauren, that was perfect. I was going to mention that because in response to Eric's comment that the harbor plan really lays out the goals and opportunities, so sort of the lowest hanging fruit. But there is sort of a lot of moving parts that can make one nervous. Who's the quarterback? To some extent, Lauren is the quarterback on these from the municipal side. But I'd say take another look at that harbor plan and see what the goals and opportunities are for each of the kind of areas of the harbor. That's the best first place to start. And then in response to Tom's comment about who wrote the bylaw, we hired a consultant who mistakenly made all of the waterfront parcels potentially developable as residential, and I was like, no way that's going to pass at town meeting. And so I helped to create the area of the Harbor Inn as a first project, maybe only project that could be residential there. And I wrote the first draft of that bylaw so that what it was is a real robust potential mixed use project. So, but it wasn't written by the developer or the harbor committee. I mean, there's no way that's not how it came out.
Mark, I'm not suggesting they wrote it, not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I've done that for a client myself, but they participated in the process. And
oh, sure, every part of the public, and everyone participated.
And I will tell you, as private citizen at the time, the perception was that this zoning was being designed for this project, which again is fine. I have no problem with. But now the proposal, we all know they're trying to get waivers of some of the requirements for it and telling us that commercial development is
okay, wait a minute. This is going beyond an information discussion.
No more content.
If we want to have a time in our next meeting to have a discussion around this, then we can figure that out. But this was just really literally to have Tim come and talk to us about what he's involved in and how it interfaces with what we're interested in. I gather from the level of interest that we should have some kind of public discussion. If you so wish to do that, send me an email and I'll work it into a schedule.
Amy, Eric had his hand up for a last question.
Yeah, I sort of thought, okay, great. So I hate to cut off the discussion, but I also feel like I've got an agenda up here that says something that I'm supposed to do, and I'm trying to do it. But I fundamentally appreciate everything everybody's saying, and it's great that we have a lot to say about this because we still have a long way to go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We will be checking back with you, and if there's anything you feel that we should know and it isn't going to show up on 143, we would appreciate being informed.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you all, planning board. And if any of you have any specific questions of me, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to do that. And again, I'm happy to come back anytime to talk about the harbor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
I'm heading out to Minot Light right now.
All right. We are about 20 minutes over time. And I'm going to punt this first to Lauren, and then we'll move forward. So Lauren, would you like to deal with our item at 7 p.m., a little late?
Certainly, thank you. So the 7 p.m. item is a continued public hearing for the large house plan review for subject property at 580 Jerusalem Road. This is continued from September 9th, and we are suggesting there is additional material that has been requested of the applicant since the last hearing. There are ongoing conversations between Planning Board Special Counsel and the Applicant's Counsel, and they're prepared to prepare that information and have it for our next meeting on October 7th. So with that, I would suggest that this hearing be continued to October 7th at 6:30 p.m.
So moved.
All in favor? Let me call people off. Tom
We
Callahan?
need a second.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Second.
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 Okay. All in favor? Tom Callahan?
Aye.
Clark Brewer?
Aye.
Paul Grady?
Aye.
Paul Colery?
Aye.
Erik Potter?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to just move this forward. So we have some administrative work to do, and then we will be done. So the first part is to just open it up and ask if there's a couple of things. One is planning board member comments, and then second, it would be great to hear reports from those who are on individual boards and committees that would be reporting to us. Clark Brewer.
I've got a comment. It should be pretty non-controversial. The meeting preamble on the right-hand side of the agenda, the last line, sarcasm is generally not considered respectful. Can we just say sarcasm is not considered respectful instead of generally? Can we just take generally out of there? I think
Are you being
everybody
sarcastic?
understands sarcasm's no good.
Are you being sarcastic, Clark?
No, not at all. I'm just saying that even though I've got that look on my face, the word generally, I don't think is necessary.
I don't think the whole thing is necessary. I mean,
Well,
it's
okay,
copied
that's,
from-
you know, I
copied-
had something little, but sorry, my finger's a little dirty.
Okay, you may speak, Clark, if you have something you'd like to say.
That's it. I said it.
Okay, thank you very much. We will edit that unless it is codified in state law.
Thanks.
Others, does anybody else have something they'd like to say?
Madam Chair,
Eric. Oh, sorry,
go.
Paul. Let Paul Colery first and then Eric.
Hang on.
I was just curious, could somebody tell me what the Oaks is, or the Oaks property, or the Oaks, is it a restaurant? I don't,
Big brick house.
The big estate on the harbor.
okay, thank you for that
That's
explanation.
what's known as for the former Roy Estate.
And before
Right.
then, it was, who was that lady?
It was the Barron estate.
Baron, Aaron,
It was the Cox estate.
Cox
Right.
estate. Cox, Jesse
Courtney
Barron
Cox.
Cox, she was Barron's daughter,
That's
Yep.
Courtney Cox from Friends, right?
her sister.
Okay.
That wasn't sarcasm, Clark.
Okay,
Get it.
Paul, you might also wonder what the other property was that
Yeah, I
Tim
was.
had mentioned. Would you, anybody like to comment on that?
That's a real gem. It's
That's the
It's-
priest place, isn't it?
It's the what, so
It is.
somebody define it for us, please.
but it's one of the few Henry H.H. Richardson residential buildings in the whole country. H.H. Richardson is one of the premier architects from the late 19th century. He snuffed out early in his 30s, but he gave us Trinity Church, libraries, and bus stations and courthouses all over the Northeast. Amazing guy, and we have this gem right in Cohasset that if you haven't seen it, take a stroll.
Okay,
Rumor has it Boston College wants to sell it.
Yeah.
Amy.
yeah, that's the other parcel that was brought up. And would somebody like to describe that for Paul?
It's
It's
very
a full-
interesting. It's a very interesting building to go into if you ever get into it, the Bellarmine House. The downstairs is all heavy wood, ornate, And then upstairs, where they all go on their retreat, is all these barren, sparse rooms, barely furnished, but with little windows, but you look out and they've got $1 million view to contemplate nature and God and all that stuff. But
Tom, you do know they call them cells.
cells, whatever they call
They,
them.
oh, no, they do. They actually call them cells.
All right, so that,
I have to say, if that property has not been connected to the sewer, it would have a tough time developing into condominiums. But, you know, it's a better site for condominiums than right smack in the middle of the harbor, but that's a whole different issue. But,
all right, so that is the piece of property that is owned by BC, is that correct? And my understanding is that they are considering putting it on the market.
Yep.
So that could be a piece of property that somebody was interested in. And by the way, that entire hillside has significant parcels that have come before us in the last couple of years for various considerations. Okay, that's just a point of information. Let's see, Erik Potter, no, Paul, okay, you got your question, Paul, and then Erik Potter.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up to a couple emails. I think it would be very helpful for me to have that random maybe meeting of, that we had briefly discussed potentially having about, these outlier things that we just don't get, that aren't project specific. I think it'd be helpful for me because, I think it would really help me be more engaged in the projects themselves, because I would then have more of a vision and have a lot of my ancillary thoughts, opinions, comments, and questions maybe answered by other members of the board. And it would give me and I'm just speaking personally here, it would allow me to focus more in on the projects themselves when they're in front of me. If we had a meeting where we could, air out our different thoughts and also field questions kind of more in a conversational manner with regards to bigger topics, more overreaching topics that, as opposed to a specific topic. Because I admittedly have just the way I have conversation, it can jump from one thing to the other. That's just the way it works for me. So having a meeting like that would be beneficial for me as a member, because then when we come back to the actual project meetings on the agendas, my mind won't be going in 1,000 different directions about the different ancillary questions and larger topics that are lingering in the back of my mind. That's just a general thought.
So we have two choices. One is we could have a working group that was open to the public, a working meeting in which we did exactly what you said. Or second, we could imagine having time within the context of our regular meetings to do something like that. I personally think we need more time. And so to do it in a meeting that we're holding other items would be not as accommodating as if we were to just say, we're going to get together in a meeting that we were not going to take on any of the town's business, and we had a discussion about the issues before us. Lauren?
Thank you. I'm glad this was brought up. I actually wanted to suggest the idea of adding a meeting on October 14th to our schedule. Right now we have October 7th and 21st. I see Paul Grady doesn't like that idea. I think because there's been a couple of members that have brought up different things that want to discuss this with the members, and I think that it deserves proper time, focus, and attention. And we just simply don't have the time to do that in between the other applications that we're dealing with in the next couple of meetings. So if the 14th doesn't work, we can consider another date. I just wanted to throw something out and, float the idea of having an additional meeting set into our schedule so that we can address a series of topics other than applications.
I think it's a great idea.
Or are you talking about like a formal roundtable?
Well, I think, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just going to say, I would just suggest it would just be a regular meeting, just this same format, but we wouldn't schedule our hearings. We would just have our informal discussions about whatever topics we wanted to discuss that night.
Sounds good.
I don't think that's a bad idea, Amy. We haven't had that really in quite a while. In every quarter, normally there's some sort of business in front of the board, so you can't say really what's on your mind.
It's possible we could wrap that together with goals. I mean, we could have individual planning board member goals and planning board goals that are common. I think that that'd be useful to do on a regular basis, but even if it's once every 6 months.
I would support that. I think that a lot of the things that have happened in the very recent past calls for us to really think about process in town, how it actually works, who does it, and how can it be done in as effective a way as possible. And so I think that combining those two, as long as we leave ourselves enough time to do those two processes, I think at least as a first cut would be a really good idea. So Lauren has offered us a October 14th meeting. Is that possible for people to do?
Yep.
I can do it.
Paul Caleri?
Yes, I'll be available.
Great.
I'm always available for you guys.
Okay, great. All right.
That's
So
nice.
we
That's
did
nice.
a huge thing just then. We did a huge thing. This is
Lauren,
great.
you'll send out the information, all that good stuff in this bloody Zoom environment.
Yes, I will. And if members have specific things that they know they want, I know there's been a couple of things that Tom Callahan brought up and Clark had some ideas. If folks would send that, email it to Amy with myself copied so that I can work with Amy to figure out that agenda and we can set that. And I won't schedule applications on that night.
Are we allowed to share these private meetings?
No,
They're
not-
still open to the public.
So, yeah,
That
no,
was,
it's a public-
Clark, that was sarcasm.
yeah.
Nice.
All right, none of that stuff. Okay, let's see. Tom Callahan.
So thinking of this scheduling of hearings on the 7th, we're going to have both the Harbor and 580 Jerusalem Road. Which one's going first? Because 580 may be maybe longer, more contentious than we think. I don't know which one's going to go first, and I don't want to shortchange the Harbor project, and I don't want to freak everybody out if we go past 9:30. So I just don't know how we're doing it on the 7th, but
I agree with Tom about that. I actually think that the Harbor Village Business Overlay is going to take an entire meeting by itself. If we think that we have approximately 5 parts and we're going to hear about 5 parts and they're going to make a proposal from the affordable housing group, then I would imagine this would be a full plate.
Well, if 580 goes too long, we just have to continue that one and get to the Harbor stuff. And I think the Harbor should be at the end of the meeting so we can go long.
yeah, I would think we'd put 580 at 6:30 and strictly hold it to be done by 7 o'clock, but I don't
Right.
see it being done by 7 o'clock. I
And
think,
we can continue it.
Well, then
don't
we would
close
just
it.
continue it. As long as that's permissible, I think that will be what we will tell them in advance, that's how it's going to go.
I believe continuance requires the applicant's consent to it, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so.
That's, which is fine. If they
Sometimes for
force us to do it-
A&Rs you do, but I don't think for a large home review.
Well, generally speaking about continuances.
We'll ask Lauren to look it up and make sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's generally the practice in all board meetings, no matter what the permit is for. But you know what? If they force us to make a decision, they force us to make a decision.
Right. Okay. So we're going to hold to a half an hour of discussion of that. They have information they have to provide for us, and it requires execution on site. So we'll see what happens. Paul Grady.
Amy, this is quick. So maybe going forward, Lauren, if we're setting up meetings, I agree that the Harbor takes up pretty much the whole meeting. So is there any way to schedule when we do Harbor business that's the meeting?
That was actually, I was hoping to do that for the 7th, but then just the nature of how things unfolded for 580 Jerusalem Road, we had to continue it to the 7th. So
No,
that's
it
why
happens.
yeah. So in moving forward, I will work to do that, to have a standalone for the
If
Harbor
everybody's
project.
all right with that, I'm not trying to throw my agenda onto everybody.
All right. Erik Potter, do you have any further comments? Okay. All right. So with that, then I will draw the planning board member comments to a close. Staff updates, Lauren?
Thank you. I will just, I'll give 2 staff updates. One is that I don't know if it's been made public at our, if I said this at our last planning board meeting, so forgive me if I didn't, but town hall is now open to the public on a limited basis for those who want to make an appointment. We are strongly encouraging people making appointments. We do have a sort of vestibule that you can ring a buzzer in, and if you don't have an appointment, we'll see if the person that you'd like to see is available, but people will not be able to just enter and exit as they wish. We're keeping track and monitoring for social tracing purposes and all that. But town halls now, you can have, on a small basis, face-to-face meetings with staff members. So that's something that's a positive, and we're making some progress there. And then my other update is actually in response, Member Brewer called me earlier today to ask, inquire on the 390 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. So I just wanted to give a quick status update since that was asked of me earlier for the full board. In that Clark had mentioned that he saw there's been progress on the building. The site plan approval that was given for the site, they are working on that. If at the time, at the last discussion that I recall, which was just about the winter, it seems like ages ago now, when we were working with the peer review engineer, John Modulewski, the planning board was working to determine if additional site modifications would be a minor or major modification. If it was deemed that it was major, they would need to reapply for another modification to their site plan. That was never sort of really sorted out. And so that's still been left hanging. And right now that site has been, they're still in the process of determining what they will do with their, whether it will be a sewer connection or an on-site septic system. So we do anticipate whichever way that goes, that there will be changes to the site plan. But I did just want to note that we are working with, I'm sorry, there's a question.
Yeah, what's 390? Which property is 390?
Oh, I'm sorry, 390 Chief Justice Cushing Highway is the site next to Stop and Shop that is under
New
construction.
building. It's the new building under construction.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. So I will be working with our special counsel again. I know she had been in contact with that applicant's attorney some time ago. So we're working to circle back on that and see. Right now it's in the applicant's court. We need information from them, but I will be following up again. I see Clark and Paul have
Clark
their
and
hand
then
raised.
Paul.
Can I just wanted to add to what Lauren said. What we approved a major modification to the original site plan to move the footprint of the building as is in the move the whole footprint. And there were half a dozen, maybe 8 or 10 other things that they were going to change from their original site plan. But they didn't have them worked out. At the time, I chaired that meeting and suggested that we allow the major modification of moving the building only, and that the applicant come back with all the other changes. And I think it's important that the applicant be put on notice that if they decide to do anything that's different than that original site plan, they do it at their own risk.
And that they should come back before us.
Well, absolutely, they should come
Right. I
before
mean,
us
and
before
maybe they
execute.
don't, maybe that's not clear to them, but they should come back before us.
Anything that they execute that wasn't approved as a part of the original decision, other than moving the building,
well,
they do it at
Let's-
risk if they don't come back before us and get our approval, whether it's major or minor modification. Doesn't matter.
let's send them a letter to that effect.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, before we're dealing with a situation where they've done something and we have to make, well, then we're in the position like with 580 of them doing something, you
Right.
never want to be in that position. So
Yep.
Okay. Paul Grady?
It's a fast one. Lauren, just educate me, because I come down that street every day. So they may be thinking about a septic system, or I thought they're digging up Sawyer Street, digging all over the place. So that has nothing to do with the new building?
No, that's not related. They have currently, there's been a MassWorks grant application filed. We should hear back on that grant in either late October or November. And the basis of if that grant's awarded, they will go with sewer. If the grant is not awarded, I am not certain, but I believe that they will consider an on-site septic system. So regardless, this decision will change what their ultimate site plan turns out to be. But yes.
Thank you. I thought that's what I thought by digging up Sawyer Street, because it turns me around every single day. I thought that it was for that building. So thank you. That's all.
Tom Callahan?
yeah, ask Lauren to see if we could just talk just briefly about the regional sewer, since we talked about sewer.
Can you take your hand down?
I just wanted to talk about the regional sewer for a second, because we're talking about sewer for this particular property on 3A. I hope everybody's been paying attention, saw the stuff that got circulated last week, the sewer commission's presentation. Corey Evans of the select board did a really interesting thing that was very simple and easy to understand about the whole sewer issues going on in Cohasset. It's on Cohasset 143. But my concern from the planning point of view is that if they're going down the road of this regional sewer, and it's still under discussion and the town's official position hasn't been decided, the discussion, as I understand it, is to either come through the Gulf area and South Main Street because of the pollution to the Gulf and to service North Situate's needs, or there's an alternative to come up 3A. And I heard mention that some of the properties on 3A are town-owned, so they don't necessarily have to be developed. But if it hasn't been done, and I don't know if it has, on these two preferred routes, I think we need to identify what undeveloped parcels are along those routes. And that could potentially be in the residential areas, opening up back land, for a potential subdivision. And on 3A, properties that might be developed into multifamily residential or commercial. I think we should get on top of what could be the ramifications of a sewer pipe coming through areas where it doesn't come through now. Yes, there's capacity limits, there's limits on who can connect, but it will open up the possibility of somebody seeking connections because there are none now. So I think we should be proactive and identify what are the potentials for development along these two preferred routes. I don't know the full extent of the routes. Like, I don't know how the 3A one gets eventually to Hull, and what street it goes up to get to Hull. I don't know if the one that's proposed for South Main and Border Street in that area is going to go all the way up Jerusalem and Atlantic. I don't know that, but we should identify that and identify what open parcels. And that leads me to be concerned about what was formerly known as Jerusalem Road Estates. Our meeting on the 14th, I'd like to be able to discuss that, because that one concerns me.
So this would be a good topic for us to put on that meeting that we're going to be working on. And I have already spoken to Katie Dugan, who on behalf of the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been tracking the sewer issue. And it is a complicated issue, and there is missing information in terms of actually figuring out what would happen. The board right now is opposed to any sort of regional strategy. But why don't we think about, somebody put it on your little bucket list, and if you think you want to have that be something we discuss when we have our meeting to discuss lots of issues, then let me know that, and I can either get the information from Katie or get it from somebody else. But I personally think this is a huge issue, and we really do need to be on top of it. So thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah, and I don't know, Lauren, has anybody identified what's along these proposed routes yet?
I don't believe it's been fleshed out in the manner that you're stating, but it can be done.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think it's hard to do, but I think
Right.
we should just get on top of it. That's all.
We have the information. I think it just needs to sort of be assimilated into one thing to look at it in this manner.
Okay.
Question for Lauren. Lauren, are we going to see, I know it benefits Situate greatly, but are we going to see the benefits to the town? Is that going to be presented?
I can certainly get information on that. We can invite Katie Dugan, we can invite Brian Joyce to speak to this. I can get you more information
Thanks.
to answer that question.
I mean, it's going to be a disruption all the way around, traffic-wise and everything. So it'd be good to see what the proposal is completely laid out, and what good's it doing us besides tearing up the roads.
So I can actually weigh in on that a little bit, which is that right now, the west side of Jerusalem is predominantly septics. Those septics are in combination with a couple of really large properties within that jurisdiction is pouring excessive nitrogen into Straits Pond. So at some point, we are going to have to come to grips with what that means. And the state could come down on us because of the fact that that is not a sewered part of, the far end of Jerusalem is sewered, but there's portions all along Forest and big plots of land that are not sewered. So if we wanted to actually look at what the relationship is between the size of the parcels, the potential of using either sewer or septics, we could do that. And I think it would be interesting for everybody to see, because it's a serious issue for us. It's sort of lurking back there, but it's real. And it's an environmental problem that we're generating. So if you want this topic on our work session, vote for it.
So let's put it on, because I think that's the benefit of the owners. I understand what you just said, Amy, but isn't the septics inherent on the owners to maintain?
Well, the question is whether or not septics are the best strategy for effluent management. And there are now top end sewage treat or septic systems that are considered to be as good as moving it around through pipes. So it's up. I mean, we just have to listen to the story, and then we can make our own decisions about how we feel. But there is plenty of information that we could access.
All right, so put it on the meeting. I'd say put it on the meeting board if all agree.
Okay, so what Lauren and I will do is we'll collect topics. We'll give everybody tick marks. We'll pick how many we think we can do in a reasonable amount of time for a meeting like this. And that will start us off having our work meeting. Okay. Well, let's see. Approval of minutes. Do we have minutes we need to approve?
No, I don't believe we do.
Okay. And then the proverbial open box. Topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance. Don't you say anything, guys. No, I'm kidding. Clark.
I have nothing. I'll make a motion to adjourn, though.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Please say your name and I'll call you in order. Clark Brewer.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan.
Aye.
Paul Caleri.
Aye.
Paul Grady.
Aye.
Erik Potter. You guys cannot follow instructions. You got to say your name. That's what they tell me. You're supposed to say your name.
I did.
Clark did follow instructions.
You did, Clark. You get an extra point. Somebody else gets an extra point.
You
Okay.
did.
Until we see each other again, enjoy this wonderful warm weather.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lauren.
Bye.
Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Good night.